Okay, I am going to kick us off, and apologies if I pause to let folks in from the waiting room. I'm still hearing a couple pings. My name is Stephanie Foner, and I work on the Affinity and Domestic Engagement team here in Alumni Relations at Northeastern. And we work to bring engaging and unique programs just like this one to the wider Northeastern community and specifically to our alumni. I'm so excited to have you all here joining us today. So first, just a couple housekeeping items. As I mentioned, as you all were trickling in, please be sure to keep your microphones on mute. You can have your cameras on or off as you are comfortable. I also recommend keeping the view on speaker view. There will be a time at the end of the discussion for question and answer. Please put your questions into the chat box. If you have questions during the course of the conversation or presentation, you can go ahead and put your questions in as you have them, as they arise. We may get to them in the middle of the presentation or have them at the end, depending on the flow. But please do not unmute yourself to ask your question. Please be sure to put it in the chat box. I will also just be monitoring the chat box if you're having any issues. So please feel free to privately message me if you need to. Automated transcription services are available through Zoom. You can hide or show subtitles or the live transcription panel via the CC Live button in the bottom toolbar. And then lastly, this event is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be made available to you. I'll be sending it out probably by midweek next week, so you can revisit this wonderful content. Okay. Sorry, hold on just one second. Okay, so we are very lucky today to have the expertise of my colleague, Michele Rapp, who is the Associate Director of Alumni Career Strategy and Alumni Relations. And she will be leading a dialogue between our knowledgeable and talented panelists today, Tieisha Smith and Jaime Hamel. Tieisha is a 2017 graduate of the DeMoore McKim School of Business MBA program here at Northeastern and Chief Administrative Officer for Marsh McLennan. In her current role, Tieisha is responsible for the successful implementation of the organization's IT strategic plan. She has over 20 years of experience across information technology and financial industries. Jaime is the Global Talent Acquisition Marketing Manager at Marsh McLennan, where he is currently responsible for the company's employment branding and talent acquisition marketing. Jaime has been working in the branding and marketing space for close to 25 years. We are so lucky to have their perspectives with us today. And now I am going to hand the floor over to Jaime.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for having me. Really excited to go through. The first thing that what we're going to look at today really just takes a look at your profile externally from a branding perspective. So that's a big piece of what I do and my team does. And if you think about my own personal career, I worked in the traditional advertising space up until about 6 or 7 years ago, where I had moved into this employment branding piece, because a big thing that companies are starting to do is not only look at who they are as a company and how that they're expressing themselves to candidates, but they're also looking at how colleagues at their own companies and how candidates are expressing themselves externally. Because back in the day, obviously it used to be a paper resume, but now it's such a more digital experience. So the main channel we're going to talk about today, obviously, is LinkedIn. So everybody here knows a lot about LinkedIn, has been on LinkedIn probably for years. If you're not on it, I would recommend that you do get on it. It's great for just basically presenting an online resume for everybody. So it's content rich from the standpoint of when you now log into LinkedIn, it's a little bit different than probably like 7 or 8 years ago, where you're seeing more of a kind of that Facebook feed from a content perspective, but it's very business oriented, so that's good. So generally, you stay out of the areas which I'm going to reiterate. Stay out of the areas of politics and religion. just keep this up to your professional career would be my recommendation. And you know, it's also a place where you can do a lot of that connectivity and networking with future colleagues. Negative from a negative perspective, I really don't see much. I would also say that I'm a little selfish in that sense because a lot of my job has to do with LinkedIn. So a lot of my job is working with fellow colleagues to build their profiles, because from our perspective, from the marketing perspective, when somebody's looking to join a new joiner or a potential candidate, they're going to do research on the people that work for a company. So I'm a big proponent of making sure that colleagues' profiles are up to speed, updated, that they're sharing on there. So that's what I'm going to take you through, is a few slides on that today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, we always say it all starts with a smile. So in your LinkedIn profile, I always say, don't have an egg. And egg actually refers to Twitter, but at the same time, we like to have a professional photo there. Recommendations is to have, you know, be looking at the photo, wear what you would wear to work, or what you where you want to be working. So that's a really important thing. The other piece of that, when you're taking your photo, stay away from pictures of having your kids in it, alcohol, anything of that nature. Again, this is your professional digital resume, so you want to present yourself in that way. LinkedIn did provide these copy points, which are really interesting from a standpoint around the data behind it. So if you do have a photo, you get more connection requests, profile views, and even more messages. Now, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, because I think a follow-up question to this presentation often is like, you know, who do I connect with? I would leave that up to the end user, who they message with, because a lot of times, obviously, you join LinkedIn and the networking turns almost into sales. So you have to use your best judgment there. Cover photo. So you've taken care of your profile photo. Another thing that I see a lot with people is not having a cover photo. This is a very simple thing to do in terms of find an image that you're passionate about. Something, for instance, you know, the city that you work in, the city that you want to work in. If, you know, another idea we talk about is if you're into golfing or tennis, you know, having a picture of a great golf course you've played at. Knowing, though, that this photo is very stylized, right? So on a phone, it's pretty small, but if someone's looking at your profile on a desktop or a laptop, it's pretty big. So the thing you'll want to do is when you do a Google search for an image, as an example, try to find an image that's really large. And in any of this, if anybody has a question, feel free to shoot me an email. I think Stephanie and Michele are going to share our contacts at the end of this. But having that cover photos is really critical, because it shows that you are putting the time into your external facing resume. So another piece to this is really important, is using your profile to start the conversation. So fill it out as much as you can. One really great thing that I know that recruiters and talent acquisition, who I work with very closely, when they get to a potential candidate's profile, they'll read about them. And if you have a really strong about section, that is really kind of like an elevator pitch to where you are in your career, or where you want to go in your career. And that's a really important piece also, because when you start filling out your profile, you have the ability to, like the example below, where you see my name, employer branding and talent acquisition marketing. That's not my job title. So you can use that space to describe where you want to go, where you are now, or you want to go with your career. And then additionally, this is fairly new. If you go onto your profile, there's a section called Your Dashboard. And if you turn on the creator mode, that gives you the option to add pieces to your profile and hashtags. Like in my case, it says it says talks about, so that's preset, culture, career growth, marketing, digital, and inclusion and diversity. So those are topics that I'm passionate about, and again, that I'm projecting to the viewer that's coming to my profile, that's something that's important to me. This is another really great area to fill in, that I think when you think from a talent acquisition standpoint, a lot of the clients that I serve are like recruiters. So they'll look at, say, Michele's LinkedIn profile. She's Michelle's, oh, geez, JDRF. It's a talking point. It can create that kind of conversation between you, who maybe the hiring manager that you're speaking with. It not just shows that you're passionate about something, but it can make that rare connection. That's really great. So an example that I would give is that one of my colleagues on my team, he had that he volunteered at the Girl Scouts of America, and I was a Cub Scout leader. So that just made such an easy connection. When I was a hiring manager and I was interviewing him, it just allowed us to kind of connect.
Sorry, Jaime, I accidentally muted you.
Oh, no problem. I was like, did I do that?
No, I did that. Apologies.
Am I going too long? No. So again, so some great data points here in terms of when you add these pieces to your profile, it just increases the engagement tenfold. So once you have your profile set up, really the things that then this kind of like drills down on the importance of this. 3 out of 5 companies use social networking sites to vet candidates. I think we all know that. 92% of them use social networking sites to recruit for job opportunities. I can guarantee that within our budget from a marketing standpoint, a large piece of that budget is so that recruiters can reach out to you. So and they're doing it primarily through something like LinkedIn. They're also going to be looking at your profile. So some of the data we have on here, they've seen that candidates have 50% have stated that they've seen inappropriate photos posted on social. 45% have seen that they've posted photos of them drinking online. Poor communication skills is the thing that has also been reported. So a lot of these things that I'm saying here, keep in mind, we're talking about LinkedIn and you say to yourself, oh, that's all right. I'm not going to be posting photos of me at a cookout with a glass of wine. Fine, that's great. And just know that they are going to be looking at your other profiles. So, look at your Facebook, look at your Instagram, look at your Twitters, go to private would be my recommendation if you're in the process of interviewing. It's a simple thing to do. Another great thing to do is just Google yourself. Make sure that there's nothing out there that's old that someone could find. Take it down if possible. And then my last tip, which is an important tip too, is if you do have things visible, look at even what your friends are saying, because your friends can be digitally kind of a reflection on yourself. So, those are the big things we wanted to go over. And again, just offering anything I can help in terms of just reach out from a branding perspective on everybody's profile.
So Jaime, we do have one specific question about the cover photo. Is it best to be brand related, such as the industry you work in or a company logo, or are there any other best practices?
From our perspective, and Tieisha is going to probably nod with this, we recommend that you do not include your company logo on there. That's Marsh McLennan. And I'm guessing that if you were to ask somebody within legal of companies, they would recommend you would not put your profile, your cover photo with the company on there. And the reason for that, from Marsh McLennan's standpoint, is it's more of you're branding yourself. If you were to say something or share something inappropriate, that's where we come from. My recommendation would be to stick with something you're passionate about. I don't think there's no right way to do it, but that's my personal opinion. Because I think that you can find something that looks really good from a layout perspective that ties together with your photo. Even I've seen great instances where, they'll use a black and white cover photo and a color photo of the person's personal photo, and it just kind of pops a little bit.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Jaime. I know we did have a question about whether the slides will be shared. Yes, the slides will be made available also, so folks can reference those later. And now I'm going to hand the floor over to my colleague, Michele, who is going to facilitate a conversation between Jaime and Tieisha.
Hi, everyone. Great to see everybody here today. Thank you for joining us. And I'm so excited to have both Tieisha and Jaime here sharing their knowledge. So I wanted to invite both of you to just share some general advice to people who are changing career direction. And certainly you can share your own experience as well.
I'll go first. Some general advice is to make sure that you are at least knowledgeable in the area that you're trying to go into. And what does that mean? That means making sure that, you know, if there are trainings in that area, make sure that you take them, because if you don't have the experience, you should at least have the theory, right? So make sure that you're taking training. I would recommend that if, you know, in that specific area that you're trying to get into, if they have, you know, magazines or different articles that are, you know, released on a regular basis so that you can keep up with what's going on in that industry or in that particular area that you're trying to go into, that would be helpful, because if you can speak currently to what's going on in that environment and what's happening, that gives a hiring manager a little more confidence that you might be able to do that position, even though you don't have the work experience.
Yeah, and to join in on that conversation with Tieisha, I know one part of my role is reiterating that to candidates, because there is data that shows women, for instance, when they see a job description or a job recommendation, they're less likely than men to apply to it if they don't hit every requirement on it. So I can tell you from experience, from working directly with recruiters, directly with hiring managers, there's nobody that hits every bullet. If they do, that's great. But at the same time, what we're trying to find within Marsh McLennan is finding colleagues that really have, you know, what I would say is take a look at what skills you do have, take a look at the job description or where you're trying to go with it, and try to find a way to connect the dot between the skill that you do have and how that would apply to where you're going. I think that's really important. And I think when I work with recruiters, that's something that they're always looking for.
Great advice. Thank you. So both of you are on the hiring side with the hiring process. So what are things that you wish candidates understood? Because sometimes candidates don't understand the hiring or don't have exposure to the hiring manager or the HR perspective.
What I wish everyone understood and knew is that everything is a part of the process. It's not just, you know, hey, I put all my skills on a resume, I submitted it. It's everything is a part of the process. And what do I mean by that? The style of your resume is a part of the process, right? You can have the best skills in the world, but if it's not presented correctly, you may be overlooked just because the style of your resume doesn't look good. You know, Jaime just talked about LinkedIn and, you know, what you should and shouldn't, you should kind of stay away from posting about on LinkedIn. Social media is a big thing, right? So you have to be very careful about what you're posting on social media, because hiring managers do look, right? So I had a manager that reported to me, and he always had a lot of different positions opened, and every single resume he would get, he would Google them, every single one, right? And when I would ask him, hey, you know, how many candidates do we have? What are you thinking about the resumes that you received from HR? One of the main things he would say is, hey, you know, we've got these resumes. This person looks good, but when I Googled them, I saw this. I didn't like that. I don't know if I should interview them. So it's important. Every single aspect is important. It's not just the skills on the resume. It's also your social media presence. What are you doing? And it's also how you present your experience.
Yeah, well put, Tieisha. And I think another from a real like technical standpoint also, part of my role here is I manage the career site where people apply through. So a big part of that and what people on the hiring manager and the recruiter side is if you have a popular role, you could be in a situation where there's hundreds of resumes that come in.
Yes.
What you see a lot of times with candidates is that they'll skip a step, or they'll provide incomplete information in certain areas. Another thing that is a really key one is when you upload your resume to a career site or you apply for a job and it parses out your resume and it fills it in. Sometimes they do that. Make sure you go through everything, because a lot of times what ends up happening is some of your experience from 2014 shows up first, or things get from a back end standpoint get messed up. But you have the ability to review all of that. So that's a big one. And for me, which is very funny, is that right now my name all over our system is in all caps, because my name, Jaime Hamel, was in all caps on my resume. So that got pulled in. And I always think about that. That's a little thing, right? So if it comes into an email box, are you shouting at me? Just make sure that it's a little thing like that. But when you're going through hundreds of resumes, you're looking sometimes for the person that takes the time to stop and do those little things.
Something I'm interested in also is, what is your perspective when you're looking at a career changer? What makes you open to a career changer? What makes other hiring managers open or not open to a career changer?
For me, when I'm looking at a career changer, what would warm me up to a career changer is that I've been a career changer quite a few times in my career, and someone has taken a chance on me to say, okay, you might not necessarily have all of the experience, but I'm going to give you a chance to see if this works out. And in my case, it happened to work out. So I am always looking at it from that perspective. But what I would say about career changers is they typically have experience, right? They have a maturity level that maybe someone, who hasn't been in the work field at all may not have, right? They bring a different perspective, and they typically are passionate about what they're trying to get into, right? If you're changing careers mid-career, you're probably changing careers because this is something that you're really interested in, right? So for me as a hiring manager, that typically means you're probably going to come in here and give your all. So those are some of the things that I look at. And it takes gumption. It takes gumption to say, okay, I'm going to step out on faith here. I may not have everything that I need, but I'm going to go for it anyway. And that says a lot, right?
Yeah, and I would also add to that is what I think would be super helpful also is to, maybe over communicate your desire with when, you get your foot in the door, do a lot of follow up. Tieisha mentioned earlier, articles, if you find pieces that are inspirational to you and you take that article, no hiring manager that I know of, Tieisha, is going to bristle at the fact of someone reaching out saying hey, based on our conversation last week, I thought of you when I read this article. Just kind of, and it's sales, and it's not being, me personally, and from the people that I've worked with, nobody gets annoyed with that, because that's showing a candidate really wants to join your team. So keep that in mind, that you can't over communicate in that sense. You can't over communicate if you keep sending Tieisha an email saying so what's the next step? Where am I going to do that? Do that with the recruiter that's working with you, generally, if you're working with a recruiter. But that hiring manager, to me, I would not hold back on developing a relationship with them, because maybe it doesn't work now, but maybe Tieisha brings in somebody that doesn't work out in 4 months. She says, what, that Jaime really showed, the grit to really connect and build it from that standpoint.
And I have done that based on, interviews with people that I really liked, but, something had to be done quickly and I needed someone who can jump in and get it done. But then I had another role that was more fitting for that person, and I reached out to them.
Nice.
There is a question in the chat box that I think is an interesting pivot on that, which is, what if the work experience you have is relevant, but it's from a long time ago?
That's one that is interesting and is being discussed a lot right now, actually, because there are a lot of people returning to the workforce. What I would say is, in that instance, leverage your network, right? Leverage your network. Talk to people that you've worked with in the past, right? That know your experience. You can also leverage LinkedIn here. Because LinkedIn gives you the ability to ask people for feedback on, what they experienced when they worked with you, right? So if your experience has been a long time ago, I already told you we're Googling you, right? And if we come across your LinkedIn profile and you have all of these people who are saying all of these great things about their experience working with you, then, if you have a 5-year gap, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? But she's got, 10 people who have given her references on her LinkedIn that says, she's done a great job. She's been able to, save us money. She's been able to execute on deliverables, etc. I'm going to give that person an opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree with and just again, and I know that I'm selfish in my messaging here, but just creating that external brand, if you have a gap and then someone goes and looks at your profile and your profile isn't updated, that just kind of reiterates the gap versus, take a little bit of time, get, and it's not just updating your profile, but LinkedIn allows you to share relevant pieces of content. You're doing that. I think someone like Tieisha would look at your profile and say, let's give this candidate an opportunity to interview.
I want to look at the aspect that, everyone says go network. And I do advise people, especially career changers, that because your resume is not going to look like the typical person in that field for a long time, that networking is critical and requires extra effort from career changers. What do we mean by that, and what should people be doing?
What I don't mean by that is reaching out to people and saying, hey, let's network.
Yes.
Right. And I personally like organically built relationships. So I always say start with people first, right? If you have people that are in there, they may not even be in the specific industry that you want to be in, but they may know people, right? Start with the people that you know. Yeah. Go into, groups that are more specialized and focused on specific areas, right? Because then you're all talking the same language, and I'll just use a particular role as an example, right? I'll use, marketing, right? Everyone in this group is in marketing, right? So you can have those conversations and it doesn't feel like, okay, what do you want from my life? Why are you talking to me? Right? You can be sharing your experience, showing that you're knowledgeable in this area and building relationships that way.
Yeah, and another way to do it with LinkedIn is you don't necessarily have to send that connection request, because to Tieisha's point, if you don't know somebody and you get a connection request, you're a little like, oh, well, why are you looking to connect? You think, is it a job? Is it a sales opportunity? If you can follow someone, right? So if you were to follow like Tieisha, and then Tieisha posts something, you can very organically respond and say, hey, this is a great article you shared. A lot of people that do it really well post things as questions to kind of get that dialogue going. So if all of a sudden you have somebody that's a career changer that's commenting and engaging with your post, that's a much easier connection than the standard, hey, let's connect, when you hit that button. Or if you are going to do that, and if you're, say, like within a connection of Tieisha, you say, I'm sorry, Tieisha, for keep using her as an example, but if you want to connect with Tieisha, but you're connected to someone, say, hey, Tieisha, I know that you used to work with Jaime. I would love to pick your, don't go that aggressive. I would love to stay connected with you here on LinkedIn. That's a lot better than that traditional connection language, which is like, hey, I'd like to connect with you.
Great advice. And I just want to throw in an emphasis too. I often suggest to people, that when you are a career changer, you want to be doing informational interviews to gather insights, like what are the trends, what companies should I be looking at, to get those insights, which I have found in my own experience to then help me on the interview side, because I've been hearing from people in that field. So it's not about just job openings, but really gathering information and insights and finding out what groups they're a part of.
Yeah, and also I would say, Michele, to that too, is there's I feel like there's a podcast for everything, right? So listen to a podcast. And I know when I was interviewing at my last job, I referred to a podcast that I listened to about employer branding and GE. And it caused a nice 15-minute conversation about that. But I think with the executive I was interviewing with, it showed that I wasn't just let me quickly go on my phone and look up some things and come up with some buzzwords, because she was smart enough to really ask me the question, did you really listen to that? So what did they mean by that? What do they mean by how they're promoting their aerospace jobs? Listening to a podcast is a very good way to, I think, get that messaging like borrowed into your brain and making it a talking point.
I agree. And I would add to that and say career fairs are also a really good tool, especially now since COVID has been in play. A lot of the fairs are virtual. And what I'm finding is, because I do attend them monthly, is that it's easier to have a conversation with someone now that they are virtual versus when it was in person, because then you kind of have to wait for everyone and you may not be able to get a chance to talk to a recruiter. But in a virtualized setting, you can kind of break off into a separate room with them and just kind of have a conversation about, where your interests lie, what opportunities are presented within their company. A lot of different companies will have evergreen roles open for when they have career fairs. And what that means is they're opening just sort of like a general job rec, right, that you can apply to. And that you typically use that when there's nothing specific open right now that fits where you want to go, but they want to collect your information so that if something does come up, they can reach out to you. So I would highly recommend using career fairs as well, because there you can build relationships with recruiters, because they are the stopgap, right, between you and that hiring manager. So you definitely want to start building those relationships with them.
Yeah, and another great way to stay connected with a company you're interested in is you'll see a term that, and it's funny, we were training somebody new on our team, a video editor, and I kept saying a term and I said, wait a second, I don't think like you see talent community. So what that really is you're signing up and you're putting your interests in, and then on the back end, someone within talent acquisition or recruiter, they're looking for skill base. So I'm looking for somebody in tech that has experience with, cloud IT. That I might have just made that up, but they have the ability to go in there and find a candidate. And it's not necessarily, you're not applying for a job, but there are teams that are called like sourcing experts that are looking for candidates that don't necessarily fit in a bucket. That would be a good person to bring into a hiring process. It also, when you sign up for those, and again, I'm being very tech heavy here, you also sign up for regular updates from the company and job alerts. So again, it's just filling your email with job alerts or key roles that you might be interested in, but then company news, so that when you have that conversation with the hiring manager, wow, Tieisha, congratulations, Marsh McLennan just celebrated their 150th anniversary. You're up to things like that.
And Jamie, would those talent communities be on the job listing page? How would I do that?
Generally, they're on the job listings page. All career sites have them. They're called talent communities or talent network. That's another one that they have, okay. But it's just a simple form. So that's a great example. If you're interested in a company and you don't see a job that you're interested in, look for talent community or talent network and sign up there. And you don't have to, some places you can upload your resume. In a lot of cases, you can just fill out your name information, and then it's bucketed by, and Marsh McLennan's standpoint, we have 12 major job categories. You click the ones that interest you, and you're marked that way for a recruiter.
Great tip, thank you. So what about some resume strategies for career changers? And there was a question too about functional versus chronological resumes.
I'm gonna let Jaime answer this one first because he's gonna have the best technical response.
Yeah, so everybody read, this is what I know from we've worked with vendors that actually look at job description, look at resume, and bring that into kind of what they're calling like the AI era. The hiring managers often will only get to that first quarter of the resume. So the first part you should do is like make sure that you have, a really good, strong mission statement about where you want to go with your career. Hit that first. And then in terms of chronological order, I have heard that the recommendation from a recruiter or a hiring manager is to start with what your most recent, but then really within those bullets in a nice, strong, concise way, talk about how those skills from maybe earlier jobs or what you have experience, make sure that those really pop. But I have heard that because there's a question of, maybe you bring something forward that you have more experience in for the job that you're hiring. But I have seen that feedback that, again, it's our brains are trained to go chronologically from most recent to, even if you think through when you apply for a job, they start with your most recent job. It like builds that way. So if you have something strong to kick off your resume, that recruiter, that talent acquisition manager, that hiring manager, they're going to keep going and they're going to get to the bottom or to the next page.
Let's also talk about some interview strategies, especially as the career changer might be competing with folks with more experience. So what should people pay attention to and also for building rapport with the interviewer, but as well as being a strong candidate?
I would say, first and foremost, make sure you read the job posting, right? That sounds like such a, why are you saying that? You have no idea how many people I have interviewed that didn't even read the job posting. They just saw the title, applied, and then as I'm having a discussion with them about the role, it's clear to me that they don't even know what they've applied to. So that's first and foremost. Make sure you understand you've read that job posting, you know what it is, right? Then find a way to relate your experience to the skills that they have listed on that rec that they say that they want, right? So for example, if they're saying, if you're applying for a position that requires you to have people management experience, but you've never had direct reports. So in an interview, how do you make up for that gap, right? If you have managed projects, right? Maybe you haven't had direct reports, but maybe you've managed projects where you've had to direct the actions of people, right? To get something done, you highlight that.
What I would add to that also is a common thing I hear is dead air when someone asks, do you have any questions for me? To me, that is your time to ask a question, but address any objections that the hiring manager you're interviewing with. So for instance, you say, if you brought somebody into this role and they, how do you envision that? How do you envision ways that I can make up that gap in learning? Just addressing it. To me, addressing that heads on through your question not only shows that you care, but you're confident in the fact that you can actually do it. Because if you're going to ask a question, it's a big thing about confidence that like, all right, I may not have this skill, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes to learn it. How would you support me? And I think that kind of is reversing it in the hiring manager's eyes.
I completely agree, Jamie. And I say, call back to your experience again, right? And highlight times when you've had to adapt, or where you've had to learn quickly, right? So you can demonstrate that I've been in this type of position before where I've had to adapt to change. I've had to, get up to speed quickly on something that I didn't know much about. Highlight that in your interview.
Yes.
Yeah, because you're not avoiding in any way. You're bringing it out, and it could answer some concerns, because I'll often see hiring manager notes, and you'll see they answered my concerns by stating, and it's almost your opportunity kind of to continue the interview and address those things.
Excellent. And I also think the questions that you ask can also be a point of distinguishing yourself from other candidates. So try to stay away from some really common questions, but ask questions that show how you approach
what do I have to
your
wear to
work.
work?
No.
Should I leave at 5?
Yeah, show insights, show how you think about your field and your work, and you'll be impressing people. One question we have is, how do you feel about taking a contract role versus a full-time role for career changers? And what's a good contract duration if you do?
Honestly, if you are a career changer, contract roles might be your best option, right? Because it's sort of a try before you buy, to be honest with you. And I've been in situations where, maybe I've been burned by some hires in a particular location. So now I'm going to go contractor in this location so that I can try out, whether or not this person is going to be a good fit for the role. And, if it doesn't work out, we can end the contract. But if it does, we might potentially be able to convert you to a full-time employee. So I would highly recommend it. And I don't think there's a specific duration, but you do have to be aware of that, right? So if you take a lot of contract roles, and you have a lot of short stints on your career, or on your resume, a hiring manager may look at that and say, well, why are they jumping around so much? So you may want to call out on your resume that these were contractor roles, because I would look at that and say, well, if I need someone to be committed to this role and they haven't had anything for more than a year, maybe I don't want this person unless they identify it on their resume.
Yeah, and also to add to that, be careful with a lot of placement agencies will offer you contract roles, and there are stipulations within there. So if you are hired, Marsh McLennan owes us X amount of dollars. So just know that going in, versus if you're just a traditional contractor applying for a traditional role, that doesn't necessarily click. The other thing that I'll also add to what Tieisha says, and I know this is common within our company, is a lot of times they'll say, hey, I want to hire someone full-time for this. They don't get the approval on full-time. They say, we'll start with contractor, because in a lot of cases, it's a little bit cheaper on some end. But the intent, like we just hired a contractor, my intent is for him to go full-time. But all I could get was a contractor, but my intent, so that also creates a situation where the hiring manager is bringing somebody in and they are I am very invested in him, making him work so that he joins our team full-time.
And do you suggest, this is from attendees, do you suggest listing online training such as LinkedIn Learning or Coursera that you've done, even if they're not credit-bearing certificates or degrees? Do these types of trainings carry similar weight, or is this industry specific?
Jamie, I'll let you answer this one first while I formulate my answer.
I think from a branding perspective, it does not hurt to have that at the bottom of your LinkedIn profile, because that's where it shows up. So to me, I think it depends a lot on what the training is. So keep that in mind from a branding perspective. Maybe, there are, like, when you think through like the LinkedIn Learning courses, some of the things they add are certificate to your profile. Some of them are really good, but know that I would do the research and I would look at the training itself and look at the ratings on the trainings, because sometimes you can put that certificate on, and if you have a hiring savvy manager, savvy hiring manager, they will look at that training and say, oh, this is like a 2-star training on, on Cobra. Like you want to make sure that it carries value, and there's ways to justify that.
Yeah, I agree. I am a proponent of lifelong learning, right? Whether you're looking for a position or not. So I think that taking courses can be nothing but good for you. The question is, when do you add it to your profiles? When do you add it to your resume? Typically for me, I wouldn't add something to my resume unless there was, something significant that I gained from it, like a certification that's industry recognized. But if I just took, a 20-minute course on LinkedIn, I'm likely not going to put that on my resume, but it could help me in an interview process because I'm now understanding more of, the role that I want to get into because I'm taking some of these, shorter courses. But in terms of listing it somewhere, I wouldn't list it unless it adds significant value to your resume.
Do you have any suggestions for messaging recruiters? Any tips on how to hook them or grab their attention during outreach?
Jamie's probably chomping at that one. I saw you perk up.
Yeah, it's like what we talked about earlier. I think that recruiters know that it is an understaffed area. That's a really important thing to recognize. That the Great Resignation has created a lot of movement in that area. It's hard to find someone to do it, and a lot of them are switching from company to company. What that creates is someone leaves a company, they go from working on the standard recruiter will say, okay, I have 9 roles that I'm working on. It suddenly becomes 27 roles that they're working on because of people leaving, people coming in. Keep that in mind. I think that from a standpoint of connecting with them, connect with them on LinkedIn. Email is the best way to I would think to connect with them and stay on top of them, because when you know that you have a lot of things on your plate, things fall off. It's not a big deal to get somebody to say, hey, just following up. To me, hey, just following up, want to know where we are in the process. I know from an industry standpoint, because part of what we track is the candidate experience. So we have lots of tools that take a look at interviewing people, not sending out surveys to colleagues, to candidates that got the job, that didn't get the job, asking them about what they thought of the recruiter, asking them what they thought of the hiring manager. Recruiters get really poor scores. Like just this is not Marsh McLennan, this is an industry-wide thing. So keep that in mind. It's they're doing a lot of work. So just the constant contact with them. I don't think you're ever going to annoy somebody when you're asking for realistic things like, hey, can I get an update? And then, just the things we talked about earlier, standing out on social, standing out on your application that you applied through the career site on. Those are the 2 things that make you really stand out.
I 100% agree with that. And just to add a little more context, I mentioned before that I typically do have a lot of different roles that I am looking to fill on my teams. And I was dealing with a recruiter that was recruiting for 60 different roles at the same time.
I was being kind with 27.
Right. And this was this year, right? And I was trying to get candidates from her, and she's like, I'm sorry, I've got so many positions that I'm recruiting for. It took me about a good 2 weeks just to get resumes. So I'm saying that to say, you've got to be creative in how you build these relationships. And this is why I mentioned the career fairs, because this gets you face time. then, you can follow them on a network like LinkedIn, because a lot of times they will post positions that they're recruiting for. You can post questions, relevant questions, when they post, the positions that they're recruiting for, and you can start to build a rapport that way as well.
And how helpful are headhunters or employment agencies, especially in the current climate?
They're probably more helpful than going at it alone, to be honest with you, because most times they already have positions that they are trying to get people for. So in this climate, and being a career changer, that may be one of your best routes to take.
Yeah, and a headhunter and an employment agency are supposed to be used when you hit a dead end in finding a candidate. Now, that's not always the case. The one thing that I was surprised by, maybe a lot of people weren't surprised by, but when I got into talent acquisition, is that they do take a hefty fee. So that does impact your salary. And if they'll tell you it doesn't, but if Tieisha has $150 to spend and it costs $25 to use she's not being charged $175. She's getting, charged for that one way or the other. So just keep that in mind. But to Tieisha's point, it's a great way to get in. Also, there are certain firms, look them up on Glassdoor, do research on them. Some firms are better than others. I'll just put it that way. But they all get paid, let's be clear. Money's coming from somewhere. They're not doing it to be nice.
And after applying through a portal, if you don't have a connection at the organization to forward your resume to, would you suggest emailing the hiring manager directly to pitch yourself for a job, or should that be avoided?
As a hiring manager, I would advise against that. One, it may turn you off from the company, because depending on what role that hiring manager is, they may not even see the email, right? And then you think, oh, they're just ignoring me, but really they just haven't even seen the email. So I would advise against that. I would go another route, as Jaime mentioned, Glassdoor, they have a lot of information about these companies. You could potentially find, recruiters there that you can reach out to, and maybe get connected with them on LinkedIn and see if you can get an in there. But I wouldn't recommend just reaching out to hiring managers.
And this goes back to something, Tieisha, you said that stuck out with me in the first question when we started today, this is a process. So you don't want to be skipping any stages in the process. I think, following that and, sticking to that is really important. But once you make the connection to the hiring manager, I think that's when you really can endear yourselves to them with, really thoughtful engagement.
And I'm definitely going to put in a plug here for the Northeastern Network. So if you've identified Marsh McLennan as your dream employer through NUSource, our networking platform, and through LinkedIn, you could find people to start building, find alums to start building a relationship with, because that can be as helpful and a different avenue than targeting recruiters, or we may have alums who are recruiters there. Last question is, Jaime, earlier you spoke about, how do you decide if you qualify to even apply for the job? So there was a question like, if I know 50% if I match 50%, is that good enough? Like, how do you decide to apply?
I don't, and I'll let Tieisha, you probably have a lot more experience in this. I don't necessarily think it's a percentage things, because a lot of times if you have 9 things on a job description, Tieisha has a job description with 9 things. There's probably 3 of them that are like 80% importance, and there's no way to put that to quantify that. So what if you hit 2 of those? You're at like 65% of the qualifications. So I'll let Tieisha take the rest of this. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jaime. And what I will say is, and I know that this is, has been a recruiting challenge, how we write job requisitions, right? Sometimes they have all of these ridiculous things and the people that you have in the organization already probably don't even have what you say you're looking for in this job rec, right? And they may have a peer that doesn't have all of this experience that you're requiring on this job rec, and it turns candidates away because they think they need to have all of this experience. And to Jamie's point, you may only be looking for 2 or 3 things, but it's listing 15. And now it's listing 15. And because you don't see 5 that fit you, you just don't apply. So I wouldn't do a percentage base. I would just say if it's something that you're interested in and you feel like you can do it and you have transferable skills that would make you easier to adapt into that role and be able to get up to speed quickly, go ahead and apply.
Excellent advice. And there's so much good strategy here, and there's many strategies. So people have to do lots of different things and see what works.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'll read some language that we worked on for tech-specific roles that we added to all of our job descriptions. Yes. We trust you know yourself and what you're looking for in your next career. If your experience looks a little different from what we've identified and you think you would be a great fit for the role, we would love to hear from you. And I think that really, we're trying to empower the person, like Tieisha said, part of my job is making sure that those job descriptions are written well. And we've added that to all of the jobs under Tieisha.
That's great to see that, especially for career changers making their applications. And I'm going to turn things back over to Stephanie now. Thank you both for a great discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, this was great. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Michele, to Tieisha, and to Jamie. Your perspective and your knowledge is just wonderful to listen to and so beneficial. Thank you to all of our attendees who joined us this afternoon. As I mentioned, you will be getting a recording of this event, and you will also be receiving the slides that Jamie used probably by midweek next week. And we hope to see you again soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.